Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us today. This is our very first information session for suppliers, manufacturers and retailers of furniture as we move towards establishing the working group for the Fit for Office program. I wanted to acknowledge that today we are here with the support of the federal government, of the Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment, who have prioritised the creation of a national furniture stewardship scheme. This program was actually one of only around 15 selected from 120 applications from different industries to establish this program. And I think that's testament to all of the hard work, the body of work that's been delivered by this industry to date, its history of collaboration through groups like the GBCA, the Better Buildings Partnership, and indeed GECA, and your collaborative support and the involvement of GECA as well in the bid, who is able to speak with and on behalf of many in the room today. So I want to start off by thanking you all for the work to date and highlighting the importance of this opportunity and the government's support of it. Thanks, Lloyd. Before we get moving, I would like to kick off today by acknowledging and paying respects to the Awakabal people, the traditional custodians of the land I join you from today. I pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and recognize all of our connection to culture, community and country. Before we get moving, we are recording this session today. We just kicked that off before you all joined. Please let me know if you have any objections to that. Otherwise, we will be sharing this session with all of you after it completes. Ask you just to keep your microphones on mute for now. You'll be invited to provide feedback at 3 important points throughout today's session. And I'll welcome you all to jump in and share your thoughts at that stage. So today, a packed agenda ahead of you. This really follows the purpose of today's session, and that is threefold. The first, to discuss a preliminary scope for the Fit for Office program and take your feedback on that. Secondly, to familiarize all of you in the room who will become or might become stewards under this program with the process of product stewardship and allow you to ask questions that you might have of the experts in the room here, Paula, Lloyd, and John. And thirdly, introduce the working group, its role, and with clear instructions on how you guys can all be involved moving forward from now. Before we introduce ourselves, I'll jump ahead now, and I see we have 26 of you on the call today. I would love to hear from each of you really quickly. I'm going to be capping this closely at 10 to 15 seconds, but if you can introduce yourselves, I'll do my best to call out each of you from the list that I see on my right here. Just give us your name and your organization. It'd be great to hear from who's on the call to kick us off. First, I see Ray. It's been logged in as Rayco Library and Learning Space Supplier. Can I ask who that was?
Yeah, hi Blake, it's me. I'm Dean, I'm the marketing manager, and this is Chai, the general manager of Rayco Library, Shelving and Furniture.
Brilliant. Under that, we have Andy.
Yeah, morning. Andy from Aspect Furniture, National Sales Manager. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Bhumika.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Bhumika Selat here, Country Sustainability Business Partner for IKEA Group.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Bhumika. Brad Denny.
I'm Brad Denny. I'm from Sturdy Frame, a manufacturer.
Good on you. Thanks, Brad. Karen, KE-Zoo, you've logged in as, or Karon. We have, all right, we'll move on from there. David Kirk. Remember to unmute yourselves, guys, if you're speaking up.
Hi, it's David Kirk. I'm with Lakshmi Furniture. I'm the architectural and design consultant, and I'm mainly promoting our Lux board, recycled melamine board product. With
Great,
Lakshmi.
Thanks, David. Donna from Director Ergonomic. I see you there. Hello, Donna. Did you want to introduce yourself? No. We can't hear you, Donna. If you are speaking, I saw you unmute yourself, but you've gone back on mute now. Ian Garrett, are you there?
Yeah, hi, I'm Ian in Zenith Interiors in Melbourne in the engineering department.
Zenith, great stuff. Thanks for joining, Ian. James Morton.
G'day, Blake. Yeah, James Morton from Living Edge, importers of many furniture brands, a lot of which are Gecko and Afadi certified.
Brilliant, thank you. Josh McGrory.
Yeah, good morning. Josh McGrory, I'm the General Manager for FDB Commercial, which is a group of 6 or 7 different furniture manufacturing and supply businesses.
Brilliant, thank you for that. I have a JT's iPhone. Could you just introduce yourself there?
That is me. That's Josh Ellis. I'm the brand manager for Cultivated, which is the product stewardship program launched by Cult Design this year.
Amazing, great. Thank you for joining us. Mark Crocker.
Hello, yes, this is Mark from Huffcore. We manufacture operable wall systems and sliding wall systems.
Great, thank you, Mark. Marshall Crick.
G'day, Marshall Crick. We're the distributors of adhesive films used in the upcycling of furniture.
Amazing, great stuff, Marshall. I'm not familiar with your product, but it sounds fascinating. Robert G.
Yes, hi there. Robert Gianello. I work at Planex Sales, and our main products are the lockers, the linear storage cabinets, and pedestals.
Brilliant, thank you for that. I have a Kate here. Did you want to introduce yourself, Kate? Still on mute. We'll move on. Tim Dyer.
Yes, Tim from UCI Manufacturing in Adelaide. So we manufacture commercial office furniture for the UCI group.
Great, UCI, awesome. And I have, I see Greg Welsh there as well. Do you want to say good day quickly?
Yeah, Greg from Winya and Gregory Chairs and Babisco and Bassett and Workstations. So,
who are you today?
I'm fantastic. Hello, everyone.
Thanks, Greg. And I also have one final person I see that's logged on. It just tells me that you're logged in as user. I'm not sure.
Yeah, look, that could be me.
My name's David Murrell from Cross Business Furniture, manufacturer and supplier of office furniture, and I'm the National Operations Manager.
Great. Where were you from? I'm sorry?
Cross Business Furniture,
Gotcha.
KROST.
Good on you. Thank you. And Manny, I missed you. Do you want to say good day?
Yeah, look, I'm Manny from Officeworks. I'm the Circular Economy Manager. Yeah.
Thanks, Manny. Great. I think I've done my best. You've been jumping around a little bit as you speak on my list to the right of screen. So I just wanted to open the floor. Anyone that I missed, please do introduce yourselves now before we move on.
Oh, hi, I'm Karan, and the company name was Kazoo that you were struggling with.
I'm sorry, I thought that might have been a meeting room number or something. It was keep.
Yeah,
easy.
no.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
No, and we've been working with Gecko for a really long time. And so, yeah, no, it was a bit rude. Okay.
Thank you, Karen. Really appreciate that. Lloyd, we'll move forward. I'll introduce myself firstly, and then throw to each of the team to say hi before we move forward. I'm independent chair. I've been asked to fulfill this role by Edge Environment, Global PC, and GECA to assist the working group through the creation of the program. My role as an independent, I am not under a contract or working with that project team for the department. And I can provide an ear to any concerns, queries, and issues along the way that yourselves as the stewards and as the industries have in the creation of this program. It's my intention to create a collaborative and inclusive space where we can really explore the full potential of this program moving forward. I've had quite an involvement for some time along the refurbishment, waste and strip out recovery journey, working very closely with BBP, GBCA and GECA across those projects. Paula, John and Lloyd, can I ask you to introduce yourselves? And Lloyd, I'll get you to kick straight on with the scoping piece once you've finished your introduction.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick things off. So I'm Lloyd, I work at Edge Environment. Prior to being a sustainability consultant, I actually worked for a furniture startup. So I'm quite familiar with the fit out and strip out process. And since becoming a consultant, I've been working heavily with BBP, doing a lot of office inventories and advisory on recovery. But for the role of this project, Edge is a project manager and will be also a secretariat to the working group, so helping and delivering the administration and delivery tasks. But more broadly, Edge, as a broad spectrum sustainability consultancy, will be helping with the material flow analysis, the environmental impact analysis with using our life cycle assessment expertise, and also supporting the team delivering cost benefit analysis and business case development. So I'll pass over to John.
Good morning, stewards. My name's John. I'm the Vice President of the Global Product Stewardship Council. Spent the last decade in stewardship in Australia, really developing business case and launching product stewardship schemes from e-waste, TVs and computers, batteries, paint, tyres. So whilst I don't know too much about commercial furniture, I do understand product stewardship. I understand how the ACCC will favour this scheme and allow you as the stewards placing the product onto the market actually take a leadership role in this and divert it from landfill. So if there is any product stewardship related questions, business case questions, or anything to do with the ACCC and pricing, by all means, contact me directly or through Lloyd or Blake as chair, and we can answer those questions.
And over to me. Hello, everyone. I'm Paula Clasby. I'm Head of Engagement and Marketing at GECA and work with many of you who are here joining us today, so thank you for joining. I'll be drawing on my extensive experience in project management, engagement and marketing and business strategy to play a key role in stakeholder engagement, conducting interviews and assisting with the overall project management for Fit for Office. So welcome again.
Thanks, Paula. Blake, I might kick things straight off and dive into sort of the heart of the meeting today, which is really honing in on the definition and the scope of the proposed item to be included within this commercial furniture stewardship program. So to kick things off, I want to present our definition that we've workshopped up to this point. And the definition we're currently working off is commercial office furniture is defined as the furniture, fixtures and fittings that are regularly used by staff or customers that have been specifically designed for commercial business interiors that are not permanently fixed or attached to a building structure. So it's really important that we are across this definition and we are across the distinction between furniture and other items that may be in a residential scenario. It's very important to set up these boundaries early and agree upon a scope that fits within this definition. But it's also worth noting that we are focusing on the commercial business interior space, which includes business interiors within universities, libraries, hospitals, other sort of commercial offices. But predominantly a lot of the work that I've done in this space has been in the actual commercial office buildings within the CBD. So that's where a lot of the data and a lot of our experience comes from. But as a national project, we are opening this up to all commercial business interiors. So it's really important to understand that. And this definition will be part of our next workshop activity, really just agreeing upon this and really ironing out the parameters of this definition. So before we go into the scope of what items we're going to be discussing today, I wanted to go a bit more high level and talk about the size of the problem and the piece of the pie that we're dealing with across the nation when it comes to commercial office furniture recovery. So each year, around 3 million metres squared of commercial office space is churned in just the state capitals alone. And this creates an estimated total of 150,000 tonnes per year of refurbishment waste. And this refurbishment waste is made up of all the strip out materials of the soft shell, which include construction and demolition waste like plasterboard, glazing, carpets, but also makes up loose furniture. And based on our experiences working with the BBP, we've noticed that strip out rates can vary, strip out recovery rates can vary between 25% recovery up to 60% recovery in most cases. And in the best case scenario where we've seen strip out projects hit that 80% recovery rate. But what we have noticed that the problematic and difficult materials that we typically see not being easily recovered or often making up that big proportion of materials that is not recycled or reused or remanufactured is that loose commercial office furniture. And on average, it's making up around about 20% of all strip out materials. And it's recognised as one of the most difficult and expensive to recover. So even though there have been sort of ad hoc and independent take-back schemes from individual providers, traditionally there's been a lot of difficulty in actually getting a consistent and nationwide recovery of these furniture items. So when we get a little bit more granular and start breaking it down into tonnes, we're looking at on average around 115,000 tonnes a year of that refurbishment waste, not including furniture. So your traditional strip out construction materials. And then we're looking at 35,000 tonnes per year of loose office furniture, which is primarily made up of chairs, workstations and storage units, but there's also a number of other items that we'll talk about today. And with this 35,000 tonnes, landfilling still remains the primary approach to dealing with this. And without a consolidated approach that can be supported by product stewardship, it will remain the most viable and obvious option for dealing with and managing this waste. So essentially what this means is that 115,000 tonnes a year of refurbishment waste actually has a better chance of being recycled, and there are quite effective pathways currently in place that are managing the recovery of this refurbishment waste. But often this other 35,000 tonnes is put into the too hard basket. And it actually represents quite an inherent market failure within the national recovery of furniture, hence making a really strong case for stewardship. If we come together, we really have a good chance of creating a recovery ecosystem, which will be able to manage and see this proportion of materials being diverted from landfill. And as we see office places beginning to decentralise in the new modern workplace, we're likely to see office furniture actually make up more of the portion of strip out waste as we see more open plan offices. So just diving into high level sort of mechanics of product stewardship, what we're essentially suggesting today is a product stewardship scheme run by the key manufacturers that will be responsible for raising a levy, a financial amount that can be used to support the furniture recovery ecosystem. So having that economies of scale and industry collaboration, we're hoping to establish an ecosystem that works through the waste hierarchy of sort of trying to store, reuse and resell that waste in a secondhand marketplace and with storage centres. If that's not possible, we're looking to refurbish and repair allowing that to then be resold onto the market. Potentially, it may need further remanufacturing into new products. And in the last case, actually recycling those raw materials back through your traditional recycling streams, where it may or may not end up back as furniture. So just to reiterate, to date, efforts in this resource recovery and furniture recovery ecosystem have been ad hoc and fragmented, and generally led by single producers, which is leading to a failure of a nationwide solution to this problem at a high economies of scale. So Stewardship offers this model where we can overcome the key challenges of the market failure, and the Fit for Office program is aiming to design a scheme that can address any current inefficiencies and get the economies of scale to make this an efficient and viable process. So now getting a bit more granular into the breakdown of what is the makeup of commercial office furniture. Over the last few years, Edge have been involved in just around 13 big office fit outs and strip outs in the Sydney CBD, where we've done case studies and inventoried the broad range of strip out waste and loose furniture items. So we've actually, over the years, we've itemised 37,000 items of commercial office furniture, and we've sort of broken that down to an average of 10.3 tonnes of furniture waste per 1,000 metres of net lettable area. And based on these inventories, we've presented this in a table of a proportion of number of furniture items, and you can see the yellow are sort of the items that fall outside of our definition that we introduced earlier, which is like laptop stands, sofas and couches, bins, plants, appliances and electronics. And the remaining green breakdown are all those traditionally furniture items that are specifically designed for those commercial business interiors. So we'll touch upon those items later. I just want to give you a bit more of a summary as to the portion that we're looking to propose to be in scope. So when we take out the appliances and electronics that already have existing sort of recycling pathways and actually have existing product stewardship, and we're confident in that recovery, we're working with a 95% of all items that we see coming out of office strip outs being accounted for in what we are proposing to be in scope for the Fit for Office scheme. So what that looks like when we break it down further into more sort of specific categories, we're looking at wheeled office chairs making up the most proportion, and this is by number of items, followed by under desk storage units, followed by workstations of all sizes, that's cornered and linear, other office chairs, which are usually fixed leg, credenzas, meeting room tables, whiteboards, storage cabinets, and coffee tables. So we can see that these are the big impact products and items that we're traditionally seeing, and this is what's making up the proposed scope of our Fit for Office scheme. So now looking at it from a high level environmental impact perspective, we've done some initial sort of life cycle assessment modelling using publicly available EPDs, which are environmental product declarations for the various products that we've suggested in scope. And when we see the weight of these items, we'll see that workstations are now the highest proportion by weight, and that usually will, in this case, will be equivalent to the highest embodied global warming potential, or the highest cost of carbon, also known as, which is a kilogram of CO2 equivalent per item. So it's important to know that these EPDs and this environmental impact assessment assesses the embodied carbon of this particular product and item, accounting for the raw materials in its extraction and processing, the transportation of those materials to manufacture, and then the actual manufacturing and installation of these items. So it's really interesting to note that from our studies and work in the BVP and our understanding of life cycle analysis and assessment of these products, in some circumstances, the embodied carbon of loose office furniture and other refurbishment waste in a strip out can actually be more than the operational waste generation, so your traditional day-to-day general waste and recycling. The embodied carbon of just a fit out and a strip out can actually outweigh operational waste generation over a 50 to 80 year lifespan. So it just goes to show that there's a lot of focus on getting buildings recycling rate, operational recycling rates up, and avoiding a lot of waste where possible. But really, from a sustainability perspective, a lot of opportunity from a carbon mitigation perspective actually lies within taking responsibility for your refurbishment waste and office furniture at the end of life. And in some cases, it's more sustainable to do so. So it's a really interesting data there. And this throughout the process of this project, we're going to be getting more granular with the particular items that are in scope and working directly with you to help quantify the embodied carbon within your products and the supply chain, which will then be used to inform our business case. Just a quick note here, whiteboards have also been included, and the only publicly available EPD for whiteboards was actually a very high impact whiteboard that was made up of substantial metal and glass, which is quite carbon heavy compared to your, I guess, cheaper, traditional, smaller plastic whiteboards that you would see typically. That's just an FYI. So now getting back to scope, and just to put it simply, what we have in scope is wheeled office chairs, under-desk storage units, workstations, other chairs, credenzas, meeting room tables, whiteboards, storage cabinets, and coffee tables. And what we've proposed to be out of scope are sofas and couches, carpets, personal lockers, waste bins, footrests, laptop stands, appliances and electronics, plants and planter pots, and other sort of miscellaneous items that we may come across. I'm going to pass it over now to Blake to open it up to the group today to have a bit of a discussion and Q&A, and we might end up going back through that scope to hear your guys' initial thoughts on what was in and out of scope.
Thanks, Lloyd. I was absolutely floored when you shared that with me earlier in the week, that refurbishment waste from office spaces was greater over the building's lifetime than all operational waste. Your red lid, yellow lid, paper recycling that comes out of those buildings. An astounding fact. So it'd be awesome. We should actually share in the slides. Maybe you can add in some of the research you've done on that for the group as well, because it's quite remarkable in that sense. I've got a few to kick off with. Lloyd, sofas and carpets, sofas and couches, I should say, and also carpets are two that you've proposed are outside of scope. Let's dive into why that's been done for now, in the context of stewardship program and in the context of implementation of a program.
Great question. Let's start with sofas and couches. This is a really great question because it is common to see sort of sofas and couches throughout a commercial office building in some of the breakout rooms and sort of lounges and receptions. And it is a high impact product. But given the complexities and the overlap with potentially residential products that would be suitable for a personal home residence or a non-commercial business interior, we really have to draw the line what is considered commercial, because it opens up us to a whole new sort of market of potential manufacturers that can get really complicated when we're trying to narrow out the scope. So it's really important that we're clear cut with a definition of what counts as commercial and what not. And unfortunately, that would result in sofas being a little bit too ambiguous and with potentially too much crossover and complications, that it would be problematic to design a product stewardship scheme around that. So we're really focusing on the scenario of a commercial office fit out, where this waste will be sort of stripped out, sitting and waiting in the loading dock and dealing with that really particular commercial business environment when it comes to recovery. And similar with carpet, there's a very well-established recycling pathway for carpets and other strip out waste. that are very different to the scenario of dealing with a potentially dismantling or rehoming, reusing and remanufacturing of furniture. They both have very different sort of recovery pathways, and that really needs to be taken into consideration when designing a product stewardship scheme. And I might pass over to John to help articulate the benefits of having a narrow scope, especially at the beginning and the initiation of a product stewardship scheme, in order to get sort of a cost-effective and a lot of cadence within the start of product stewardship, with the option of adding in additional items once the scheme is matured. So yeah, I'm happy to pass over to John to help articulate some of the mechanics of product stewardship as well.
Thanks, Lloyd. Look, I do understand there's quite a few individual companies who have take-back schemes for furniture. This is more of a broad product stewardship scheme. So in Australia, we're very fortunate to have two overarching defined approaches. The first is a voluntary approach, which is the path we're taking at the moment. And the second is one with underpinning regulation. The Commonwealth Government have deemed that office furniture, commercial furniture, is a problem, and all states and territories have agreed to put a scheme in place. We're fortunate enough to start on a voluntary approach, giving you, the stewards, industry there, the ability to design your own scheme, which is considerably cheaper, it's more efficient than letting government get involved. And we've seen that when you compare the paint scheme, which is voluntary, to the TV and computer scheme, which is a regulated approach. So with that in mind, the idea of a product stewardship scheme is that the cost is internalized at manufacture or import. So the cost of the disposal and the recovery is internalized right at that point at the factory gates. And as a previous production engineer, I completely understand that is not generally the case when you're designing and manufacturing a product. You internalize the cost of disposal. But stewardship in Australia, particularly, in Europe, not so much. Everything is regulated. It's very expensive for manufacturers, but here we have the opportunity to do that voluntary. So with that in mind, the scope defines the recovery. So if you were to include the tail end, the lots of very small items which have different recovery paths, the cost to the scheme increases dramatically. So the idea for an efficient voluntary scheme, you kind of want somewhere in the region of greater than or equal to 80% of the manufacturers or importers, those companies, placing the in-scope material on the Australian market in the scheme. That way you can own your own scheme, you can define it, and you internalize the cost. And that's where the ACCC comes in to allow the stewards, you guys, to increase your price by a nominal sum across the board to recover those products. So it's really a consumer pay scheme, but it has to go through the ACCC, so there's no collusion or cartel effect. So when you think of things that are in scope and out of scope, it's always best to make sure that scope is as narrow as possible, but fit for purpose, so you make sure you maximize the amount of material you are actually diverting from landfill, recovering, reusing, remanufacturing, and cut off the tail, which is the smaller, difficult to recycle items that don't have too much of an impact, so you can get the scheme underway. It's also important to note that you can add things onto a product stewardship scheme by going back to the ACCC. It's very difficult to take things off. There's not an example in 10 years of product stewardship since the Product Stewardship Act was enforced that materials have come off a scheme. So it's always easier to add. So it's really up to you to own the scheme, to manage the scheme, to identify what is in and what is out, and making sure you have around 80% of the market of in-scope material sitting around the table and working together and defining and honing this scheme to be as efficient as possible without government stepping in and regulating. So I hope that sort of covers.
Yeah, absolutely, John. I might pop back to you. We're going to talk about the working group that entails and the responsibilities of the group as well moving forward, which I think you were touching on there. Ian, I've got a question for you in the chat. Did you want to try to articulate that and direct it to either Lloyd or John?
Yeah, I'll try. Yeah, we supply a whole range of products through one delivery, one client. So they might want product stewardship. So we've got things that are covered by the product stewardship and things that aren't. It seems a bit incongruous that it's not. We can't say all our products are covered by product stewardship. Particularly, there's a lot of sofas and couches going in now, a lot more than in previous years, and also personal lockers. A hell of a lot of personal lockers are going in now.
Yeah, that's great, Ian, and that's really why we want to hear back from the working group, the stewards, to define the scope, because if it's something that we've missed, it needs to be included. However, on saying that, the National TV and Computer Recycling Scheme, which is a regulated scheme, is just that. It is TVs and computers at the moment. So companies, you know, Sony, Dell, HP, who manufacture a lot of different electronic equipment, their price is increased only on the items that are in scope, which is TVs and computer peripheral equipment. So it would follow a similar train here, whereby in scope material, upon authorization from the ACCC, you would to be able to increase your price equally across all of the stewards against that certain product, whereas some of your products wouldn't have the levy attached to it. So that would be something that the ACCC would rule on. However, if the group decided that personal lockers were of a volume and you had, you know, that sort of 80% of the market share in the room, then obviously that would, you know, we would put that into scope as well. So it's really for the group to own and decide on what is in scope and what is out of scope. It's not for us to tell you. This is a first cut of what will be taken all the way through to the ACCC to increase the price. For example, a wheeled office chair, we may find through the business case and the economic analysis that it costs $5 to recycle it. So you would put your price up by $5, or you'd request to the ACCC that the whole working group, if they made wheeled office chairs, would put their price up by $5 to recover that. Whereas some of your products wouldn't attract that $5 levy. Does that sort of answer your question, Ian?
Yeah, that it's open to what's decided. But yeah, the overall point was that for as offering a service to a client, it seems to me the clients prefer to hear that all the products we're giving them are covered by stewardship, rather than these are and these aren't.
Yes, look, I absolutely agree. In an ideal world, everything would the cost of recovery and disposal would be internalized at the point of purchase. The idea of in scope and out of scope, we have to start somewhere, and it really comes down to that 80% of approximately of the market, because you don't want free riders. So if you were to include personal lockers and the rest of the market were not, you would then be borne with the cost of entirety of taking those back. So the idea is that it's a shared cost amongst all the stewards in a reasonable cost and a reasonable scope of material. But look, I do understand that, yes, absolutely, in an ideal world, we'd have everything to be recovered. And that's something that the working group will discuss around free riders and also out of scope material coming back through the system to be recycled or recovered. You know, and that's something that the business case will highlight. What is the cost of that? It's labeled contaminants. So anything out of scope is a contamination of the system. What is the cost of that? And is that something that can be internalized within the mechanics of the whole scheme? So we're a little bit not quite there yet at all, but it's something to bear in mind around discussing and agreeing what is in scope and what is out of scope.
Okay, yeah, it's good to understand how that gets worked out in the system. Thanks.
I noticed in our introductions earlier, personal lockers was certainly one that came up, and also sliding wall partitions. So I'm just noting them for Lloyd and the team that maybe worth some follow up on those items in particular, and worth highlighting the recovery process that will handle these products. Needs some consistency in terms of materials. So I think what Lloyd, you were mentioning earlier, carpet with carpet tile, let's say, with a bitumen backed or PVC backed backing, is a very different process to recycling a workstation, for example. And I think where we can build simplicity in that first instance and stick to common materials within the products, so plastics, metals, timbers, and the like, we do sort of simplify that recovery process. I note also, Tim Dyer, thank you for that. There is certainly many challenges when we're looking towards the future, and there's a lag time, or there's usable life for these products. I'm just going to park that, your question in particular for now. Certainly consideration of the working group moving forward, and something that will be well investigated in the cost benefit and business case design to keep us on track with scope. James, you've talked about custom furniture to sort of simplify your question in the chat. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess you've noted that sofas and couches are out of scope, and I definitely, I can appreciate why that would be. But I think more and more what we're seeing, and we mentioned this Lloyd, you mentioned this in your introduction, is that there's a lot more upholstered items are going into commercial workspaces, and they're not necessarily just traditional sofas, that might be considered residential furniture that crosses over into a commercial fit out. We're talking about custom, they might look and slightly different to a standard residential sofa, but they've been designed specifically with architects and designers for these commercial spaces. And so really outside of that particular space, they probably have a limited opportunity for reuse, as they stand, today. So you're going to get, I feel like with this evolving workplace, you're going to get more and more of this product, and that is going to become as much of an issue as, maybe not in the percentages that you're talking about around office chairs or workstations, but we are talking about less and less workstations and office chairs, right? And we're talking more about more collaborative space, and so those are things that you may need to consider as this evolves, and that certainly upholstered items of some sort may not necessarily be, as you say, sofas and couches, which are potentially, if we're just talking about standard sofas and couches, they might have good pathways into resale and things like that, if they're decent products. But it's really these custom items that I think you're going to have more and more problems with in the future.
Yeah, it's really good that you raised that point. And hence this next working group, the primary agenda will be to explore these potential items that may be problematic, and potentially find a way on to what extent we can build it in, or how can we mitigate that risk. So this is just the start of the discussion, and hopefully we will, by our next working group, we'll have more time to explore the potential inclusion and exclusion. It's really great to hear it, because it is a transforming landscape given what's going on with COVID. So this is exactly why it's important that we get your feedback early, and we can help future-proof our scope to be encompassing of what the materials are likely going to be going forward, not just what we've seen in the past. So thanks for raising that.
Yeah. That just about wraps up. I mean, I mentioned earlier the purpose of today was to socialize a preliminary scope for the program. The third item or reason for today was to talk about the working group and its role moving forward. We're fighting not to jump right into that right now. So we will be coming to that, and I think that will give you a lot more clarity on how the group comes to resolutions around scope, etc., and how you guys can partake in that moving forward. Finally, just one question. Paula, and I think this is something's been echoed to you from several people or several GECA members. Does the scope include library furniture, bookcases, etc.? And/or I think this is getting towards the scope of, is this office furniture only, or can this be, workplace furniture that might be used in a university or might be used in sort of other work environments? So Lloyd or John, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah. So the levy is product agnostic. So if the levy were to be attached to a whiteboard, for example, then all whiteboards would be accepted through the scheme. So I'll give you an example of the paint scheme that was launched in 2016. That's 15 cents per litre on architectural and decorative paint. So it's irrespective of whether that is a tradie painting the inside or you've gone down to Bunnings and picked up a 4-litre tin. It is all architectural and decorative paint sold across Australia. With participating members, the ACCC ruled that they are allowed to increase their price by 15 cents a litre. That 15 cents goes back to the organisation that runs the scheme, the stewards, and that recovers all architectural and decorative paint, leftover paint in Australia. So whether or not it would be, if it was a bookshelf, then if it came under the in-scope material on the ACCC application, then that all bookshelves would be allowed to be recovered. So which is why, going back to the sofa discussion, it would be very difficult to identify from a manufacturer or an importer if that sofa was deemed to go into a reception area or whether it was going to a home. So with things like bookshelves generally and things like storage cabinets, it would be more commercial where the volume is, and that way you would be able to increase your price to recover bookshelves. So yes, if it was deemed that it was an in-scope product, it would be able to be recovered through the scheme. So it really is location agnostic.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it occurs to me that we might need to look at sort of business to business sales versus business to consumer direct.
Yes.
As maybe some form of informing the scope as well.
Yep, that's right. And that can be done through accounting systems. The paint industry did it through their accounting systems, whether it was a business, a commercial account, and you can identify where the product is being sold into.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. I'm going to keep things moving on the agenda. So skipping forward now, we've called this benefits of product stewardship. We wanted to better articulate the model of stewardship and how it serves in a collective manner for the group. And we're going to open up to a lot of questions. The way, Lloyd, you can skip to the next slide. These are some of the things that the team came up with, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to ask a few pointed questions to each of the team on this, and then I'm going to invite really everyone on the call today to do the same. So try to understand and allay any uncertainty that you guys might have around how stewardship works. So Lloyd, looking at this, the environmental impact, we understand there's opportunity, there's a market failure right now. We know that we are seeing a lot of furniture going to landfill. How can Fit for Office fulfill that need for material recovery, but also support better integration with reporting programs? So things like GBCA, Green Star, etc. What's the capacity to build in, the reporting that a lot of either report is asking for or building standards?
Yeah, that's a great question, Blake. And the way that I can summarize that down is that once we have fully articulated the business case and we have a lot of that in-depth knowledge on our environmental impact assessment, life cycle assessment, of all these, a wide range of products, which will be working with you directly to understand the supply chain, the materials that go in, the amount of material flow throughout the country. We'll be able to have some really great data on life cycle implications. And what that will allow, it will allow you to offer your customers a bit of a value add of having sort of transparent and accurate LCA life cycle assessment data that will sort of facilitate their direct reporting of carbon mitigations or carbon avoidance, and really ticking the box on their sustainability reporting and compliance requirements. So I've seen it with a number of the big property clients who are starting to really explore case studies on doing zero waste fit outs or carbon neutral fit outs, where they're going to be reporting on the amount of secondhand furniture or the amount of recycled furniture that they put into their new office fit out. And it's something that's going to be growing more and more in the industry, and something that will be a great value add to your customers, to be able to give them a sort of an actual figure of how much carbon have you mitigated through purchasing a product that fits under the Fit for Office stewardship scheme. And that's just in addition to more generally and more like nationwide community of reducing less waste, having less waste ending up in landfill, increasing resource recovery in general, and having a sort of emissions reductions across the nation. So it's something that we'll be able to really transparently and accurately report on, and provide these insights to the customers and associate that directly with the product.
Great, and it sounds like a neat way to stratify the market in terms of those participating and maybe those not, being able to really clearly articulate that benefit. There's definitely efficiency in working together on that. Paula, I'm going to throw to you next. I see social down the bottom there. I see collaboration, and I think GECA. This is you guys are about. Speak to me. Can you give me examples? Maybe in the past of how collective action has supported the industry, what benefit it has created. And certainly, if you want to go into it, employment opportunities within circular business models, I think that's it's a really exciting ancillary kind of benefit that this program could have.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you. So yeah, basically collaboration of industry, across the life cycle of office furniture will help all of us achieve more than what we could achieve individually. So, leading to more innovation, efficient processes, improved communications, and increased success, in reaching our common goal of reducing environmental impact, through something like this product stewardship scheme. So, and being a part of this scheme also provides, potential stewards with an opportunity to use the Australian government product stewardship logo. That really tells your customers that your product has the government stamp of approval and contributes to a circular economy with high industry support. And so, our GECA licensees definitely would understand and be familiar with the benefits of having a reputable logo to help identify and give that recognition of their best practice in manufacturing. So it really, solidifies what they're doing and makes it easier to communicate to the wider audience that you've committed to that. And this also gives a competitive advantage and helps to demonstrate sustainability claims when competing in government procurement activities, for example. And GECA is, many different standards that we do have. There's a whole range of different channels that we assist with. But with furniture, we know that it's one of the most popular in terms of our standards, and it's definitely an established area where there's a lot of incentive across our industry, and that continually grows. So yes, a lot of benefit, and I hope you can all be a part of it.
Good. Thank you, Paula, for all your hard work leading the group today and pulling together today's session as well. John, we have a few minutes only to touch on this one, but I wanted to throw to you, there's an economic case. This is right up your alley. How has government supported these projects in the past? Or the procurement effect. So how have programs interfaced with government and with large users in industry to create the case and push product stewardship. And I know you've got, I think there's a slide following this that might have some of the implications of benefits and voluntary schemes on there as well, which I'll ask you to touch on if you'd like to as well, just in the interest of time. We've got sort of 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's sort of a multi or a double-edged sword with benefit. So on one side, you have the voluntary and regulatory approach. So we've found that in the past, schemes that have taken on the responsibility voluntarily are about 5 to 10 times cheaper to run than regulated schemes. So looking at the oil scheme in Australia, the TV as computers, they're all regulated versus ones that are done voluntarily. Europe, as I mentioned earlier, just regulate. If there's a problem and it's across a complete sector, they regulate it and it's very expensive. Here we can do it voluntarily. So by doing it voluntarily, you've got a cost saving up front. The flip side of that also is the governments in the past have, along with private industry tenders, have recognized product stewardship as a sector and reduced their costs, or put a blanket statement. So the Vic government fleet vehicles put a mandated that all tyre retailers have to be part of Tyre Stewardship Australia to supply Vic fleet. So that's a huge impost to Bridgestone, who joined literally because of the fact that VicGov said that you need to be a member of Tyre Stewardship Australia. So we're finding more and more tenders are looking at, you need to demonstrate that you have, you're either a member of a national product stewardship scheme rather than an individual take-back scheme, which are very different programs. So you've kind of got two advantages: one up front, reduce cost, and the second one is government and industry tenders.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. I think we've probably mostly touched on this slide here, unless there was anything you wanted to pull out.
Just on that bottom right-hand corner around free riders, going back to the in-scope material, the larger the scope, the more product you have in there, and the less likely you are to get the industry around the table. So the reduced cost does go a long way to eliminating free riders. And free riders are those companies who do not want to take part voluntarily, but their product is included. So effectively, the stewards pay for those companies that don't wish to be a part of it. There are a number of ways to eliminate free riders. Reduced scope is one, but recently the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Water have been authorised by the federal court to call out companies that aren't doing the right thing. They're not joining voluntary schemes. In the past, that was there was a blanket caveat on that government couldn't identify individual companies, but that has changed now. That the minister can publicly announce companies who have not joined a voluntary scheme. So there are a number of ways, but reducing the scope up front, that's a great way to mitigate free rider issues.
Thanks, John. Certainly hearing from the department and the ministers themselves, 2020 year was a massive year all round, I think, for product stewardship, and a huge commitment under the National Waste Action Plan in 2019. So hearing from them and offering the working group the opportunity to sort of talk through it with those guys, that, you know, the government's rights, responsibilities, legislation, etc., will be an area, I'm sure, of interest of the working group moving forward. Opening to the room here, James, you had a question. I'm just going to paraphrase it here. And John, you might be the right person for this one. Will participants themselves have access to the Fit for Office brand, or would it be down to individual products only? I think it sort of talks a little bit earlier to Ian's questions around product versus entire catalogue.
No, it is generally the company, the brand will be allowed to use the product stewardship brand, the government authorised product stewardship brand.
Right, got it. Cool. From the room, any further questions on that component, that sort of short presentation around stewardship?
Can I, Blake, can I just quickly clear up a bit of some chatter around tons to landfill? That's a bit of a sore point in Australia. There are some, NT, for example, has a 0 to landfill cost. Queensland got rid of theirs and now have introduced a $20 landfill levy. New South Wales and Victoria are some of the highest. The landfill levy is set for the state, and then it's up to the landfill operator to increase it. And then that's also dependent on whether the landfill is government owned or privately owned. If it's private, they have a baseline with the state sets, and then they can basically charge what they like. So the way I've calculated it is $150 a tonne. That takes into account the highest landfill costs, and also the fact that NT and a couple of other states don't actually charge, and Queensland is a growing landfill levy. So it's very difficult, and this is just a rough one, $150 a tonne, but it's worth noting that part of the cost benefit analysis will go into that normalising. What does that landfill levy look like? What are some of the people charging? The idea that these recovery programs will make sure that it has to be cost effective to recover it. The ACCC won't rule on public benefit if it costs more to recover the product than it would to landfill it. Because what we want to try and do is, landfill is a legitimate pathway to disposal. It's legal in Australia, and it's on the waste hierarchy. However, it is at the bottom, and the idea of these programs is to elevate up the waste hierarchy to have a better outcome. So it has to be cost effective, and that was something we'll really unpack. The working group will unpack during the development of the cost benefit analysis and the business case.
Great. Thank you, John. Hopefully that clears it up. There's certainly quite a bit of variation across the country.
I just add as well, just very quickly, in our very first introduction webinar, I went through, many of our licensees who are here with us being GEC certified. Obviously, they have that advantage that, they have thought about end of life in the design process, and that's a real key, to circular economy, to actually helping and ensuring that the products to the very most don't end up in landfills. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Hey, Lloyd, do you want to run through now the working group? Seems to be a lot. I think a lot of today's been the working group will be, sounds like they've got a lot on their plate. So fill us in on how that works in depth before we've just got 25 minutes left. So if you can get through this in 10 minutes, we'll leave 15 minutes for any final questions from the group before we wrap up.
Thanks, Blake. So regarding next steps in establishing the working group, I think it's beneficial first to take a bit of a helicopter view and get a high level overview of our actual grant and the scheme project over its 3-year lifespan. So currently we are at that scheme evidencing phase. So you'll see in the bottom left of my screen, we're currently at that red dashed line where we've started mapping our stakeholders, and we're in the process of establishing the working group. Once we have that working group established, that's when we'll commence our initial material flows analysis, a bit of a deeper dive into stakeholder engagement to really get some of the data that will underpin our business case development. So that will lead us to the end of this year. And as of next year, we'll then really start fleshing out our material flow and environmental impact analysis. We'll start finalising our business case, designing our scheme and governance structure through a series of options analysis and workshopping to see various scenarios and different options that we can take from a scheme design. And that will lead us to up to the end of next year, where we hopefully will be putting forward an application to the ACCC for a voluntary stewardship program, where the working group and the stewards will agree upon recovery outcomes for the materials in question, and we'll be raising a levy and in effect their prices on certain products to create a pool of funds that can support the recovery of those materials. Once that application is hopefully approved, that will take us into 2023, where we now will have an accredited scheme, which we will then design an implementation strategy, which can take some time to get up and running. And there can be some gaps between accreditation and actual operations of the scheme. But that's what we've got to look forward to over the next 2 years. And just to give you a bit of an overview of what our stakeholder engagement and our communications look like. We're not just going to be working with yourselves as manufacturers in the working group. We're going to be working directly with users, so like building owners, tenants, architects and designers, as well as sort of the logistics, transportation companies, building contractors, refurbishers and recyclers through a series of industry reference groups that will sort of underpin and sense check a lot of the scheme design options. So it's a very collaborative process with all stakeholders, and there will also be contact with just the general public and other key stakeholders that don't really fit into any of these categories. But more particularly regarding the working group and how we'll be engaging with you going forward, we'll be hosting quarterly working group meetings. We'll be having direct email contact and out of session calls, and any feedback and discussions that need to happen, we can manage that as needed. But yeah, this is a bit of an overview of interest and influence of the various stakeholders, with the working group really being the pinnacle of our stakeholders that we'll be managing most closely and most thoroughly throughout the project. And just to give you a quick overview of the basic fundamentals of the working group, what we're targeting is that the working group will target 80% market share for all items in scope of the program. And John has touched upon the mechanics there of why that's important to have that 80% market share. And these working group members will be responsible for providing some of the critical data that will be required for the material flows and business case. Essentially, any and all important decisions will be made independently through the working group and having sort of unanimous agreement and approval throughout various stages of the project. And once we have the scheme design agreed upon and a business case that has a net public benefit, the working group will agree to be taking this business case to the ACCC, and they will be responsible going forward to support the team, the scheme implementation. So as to now go on to what the immediate next steps are over the next month and for the remainder of this year, the immediate next step will be to really get an understanding and an agreement of what the terms of reference are for being a member of the working group. And the terms of reference document will set out the governance framework for efficient and effective collaboration going forward through all the decisions and approvals that will be going through the Fit for Office scheme. And this terms of reference document has been designed on the principle of encouraging positive, transparent and collaborative working between all the working group members and stewards. So we're over the next week, expect a phone call from myself, Paula, and John and Blake may be involved there, running through and discussing what these terms of reference mean and some of the things you can expect by being a member. And we're hoping to have a signed copy of this document for each working group member by the end of the month. Once we're happy with the participation there, we'll be then kicking off our first official working group workshop, where we're doing a placeholder for the 15th of October now, but that can be changed as per availability. But this working group will really be to finalise and confirm the working group members. We're going to really get granular and take a deep dive into the definition and scope to make sure that we're all happy and in agreement of what will be included within the scheme for its initiation. And once we have got an agreement there, we'll be moving straight on to commencing data collection, detailed stakeholder engagements, get an understanding really of the business models of all the work group members to build out our material flow analysis, start doing our deeper dive into the environmental impact assessment and drawing in a lot of the life cycle and carbon data associated with the materials and products in question. And this will be carried out through surveying, face-to-face interviews with myself and Paula. And this will really be forming the foundation of our next steps going forward, which will be take us into next year. January next year, we're going to commence our business case development and scheme development, describing our public policy case and the industry's willingness to pay, finalising our environmental impact and cost benefit analysis, mapping our end of recovery options, and at the end of that year, making that application to the ACCC. So this is the immediate next steps. I'm really keen to get to know each of you better and have some of that face-to-face interaction to really explore in granularity some of your feedback and concerns and opportunities for Fit for Office going forward. So you can expect us to be reaching out very soon. Happy to pass back over to you, Blake, now to facilitate any final questions or discussion points.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lloyd. I'm going to open it directly to the room at this point. We had till 12, so welcome any questions on specifically the working group. What's next? Anything around the mechanics of stewardship and even back to scope if there were still outstanding issues from the room.
There's a question from Ian there. So he's talking, are we looking at a ballpark 10 cents to 15 cents a kilo levy based on the determination rather than the landfill cost? Good question, Ian. Honestly, we don't know. The economics haven't been laid out yet. So the next stage will be post the forming of the working group is to undertake and the agreement of the scope that sets the platform. So from that we can build the scheme. The next stage after agreeing the scope is to do an in-depth material flow analysis based on the in-scope material. That will give us a fairly good handle on the volume of in-scope material. Then we'll look at what are the transport and disposal costs associated with that in current form in landfill. And then what is the cost to recover it, whether it's recycled, reused, remanufactured. So the economics will be laid out, and from there we'll be able to determine what does a levy look like. The paint industry came up with a 15 cents a litre back in 2014, and they've just had an ACCC application approved for another 10 years at 15 cents. So it doesn't have to be absolutely, perfect. But what it does allow for to make sure the product stewardship organisation, the Fit for Office organisation that will run this, is not insolvent in its first year. The other thing the ACCC will look at after its annual report is to make sure that it doesn't have a huge bank account, which happened to Drummuster and ChemClear, the agricultural chemical stewardship scheme, who they had a lot of money left over and they had to readjust the levy. So it's not quite finger in the air stuff, and it's not exactly a science, but we'll get a fair figure that will be fit for purpose.
Add to that, John, as well. It's the ability to include social and environmental benefit as well in that ACCC or that business case, which I think is really interesting and I guess exclusive maybe to a collaborative or stewardship approach through the ACCC. Environmental benefit is accounted for, job creation, social impact through employment, those types of things. They are also considered benefits of the scheme when we look at this program. It's not just cost of recycling versus cost of landfill.
Yeah, 100%. So whether or not we're looking at social enterprise to remanufacture or deconstruct, whether we're looking at social housing to increase, social benefit and social welfare, there are many different ways that the public benefit will be examined rather than just purely on cost. Yep.
I did interrupt someone a second ago. Was that?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to to reflect that back. So like I'm interested in a figure that I can put up through the company here to give an idea what's going on. But it sounds like it could be cents per kilo or dollars per kilo based on the scheme that we design and what's decided by the working group.
Yes, correct. Yeah, that's generally how it works at the moment. So the tyre scheme attracts 25 cents per passenger unit. As I mentioned, the paint is 15 cents a litre. Batteries are 4 cents per AA cell. So it's 24 grams of the battery. The TV and computer scheme is based on a per kilo rate of each product attracts a different cost, and you pay your liability over the overall how much product you put on the market. So there's a couple of ways, but generally, yes, you'd be looking at a cents or dollar per kilo. And where this becomes efficient is if you do have 80+% of the market sitting around the table, everyone's paying a little bit. And that's where you get your real economies of scale and your efficiency rather than a few paying a lot. So if everyone chips in a little bit, you end up getting a really fantastic scheme and great results. And at the end of the day, the consumer pays. So it's not too much of a cost impost once the scheme is up and running. But the idea is that if a lot pay a few cents, then the benefit is maximised.
Thanks, John. James.
I'll be here.
Oh, Ian, are you able to put your?
Yeah. Yes.
You're on mute, Blake.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking to myself there. James, I was just getting onto your question in the chat there, which was total number of participants in the program if it gets off the ground, which Lloyd, you might want to answer. I think that comes back to striving for 80% you had on one of those slides there.
Yeah, that's right. So based on our initial discussions, and John, feel free to jump in. The initial ballpark figure that we were working with was 10 to 15 members that represent 80% of the market share of the products in question. Obviously, that's open to be flexible if we have a lot of engagement from the industry and everybody does make up a significant portion of the in-scope items. But for now, a ballpark figure to be 15, I think. John, is there any other dynamics that would affect the number of stewards?
No, it's really just around efficiency. Some companies are quite happy to sit out, take a bit of a watching brief, and happy that the sector as a whole will decide what's best for the sector. And some companies want to take a leadership role. So it really is down to identifying what the in-scope material is, and then a working group of those who wish to actually take a leadership part in designing the scheme for the sector, and those who don't, quite happy to watch it develop and interject where necessary. But so it's really around that initial in-scope material, and then the companies that wish to sort of roll up their sleeves and get down to the nuts and bolts and design it.
Great. Please, any other questions for the team whilst we have them? Feel free to unmute yourself and jump in.
No, look, I think, sorry, I had to bugger off because I had an urgent architect annoying me, bloody annoying architects. The main concern I've got is you've got people in the room who are going to be potentially here because we're doing the right thing, and you've got another probably 80% of volume coming in containers from overseas that are going to skirt around this whole thing. That's my main concern.
Yes, that is pretty much the crux of derailing any voluntary approach is the free riders. Absolutely. So the government, as mentioned earlier, have put mechanisms in place to address those companies directly, and then also if they don't wish to join voluntarily, call them out. There are other mechanisms that the industry sector can get together and really drive home through GECA and companies that are promoting product stewardship to say, do not supply into this into the sector unless you are a fit for office steward, and really drive change through that. But there's always going to be companies who want to skirt around these types of schemes, or paying levies on importation, doing the right thing, just putting really crap products onto the market, using slave labor, child labor. I mean, there's just, a myriad of issues, but which we can expect, and that's going to be the case, which is why getting that greater than 80% of the in-scope material manufacturers and importers around the table to agree a price and actually make this happen is far better than letting government get involved, because whilst they will mitigate free riders through regulation, there will also, people will always try and get around it anyway. So there'll always be a level of free riders, whether it's a regulated scheme or a voluntary scheme. The difference is you get control, and it's a lot cheaper. But yes, there's always going to be people doing the wrong thing. And I think through COVID, the cream really does rise to the surface. We see that, on a daily basis. So we have to expect that, but we will design mitigating situations and circumstances and good comms to try and reduce that number, which is why it's important to have the maximum amount of stakeholders around the table that are placing in-scope material onto the Australian market.
And it's worth saying, if there is any notable absentees, when Greg and the rest of the people on the call today, you look around and you look at that list of scoped items, and you see that there are manufacturers not present today that we may not have contacted, please speak up. Let us know who they are, and it's really the job of this program to get in touch with them and have a one-on-one conversation and do our best to keep them involved. Any final questions from the room?
We've got another question from Robert. Will the levy be a flat rate for all the products, or determined by the quality of products, either poorly built versus well built? A good question. That will be part of the scheme that the working group will design. Absolutely. There's no reason why there can't be incentives. So rather than the levy being based on quality, there could be an incentive that the levy is reduced, or you get a larger portion going back through the system for quality. It could also, you could have whether it's Australian made or whether it's imported. You can have whether it's a laminated product versus the solid wood product. There's lots of different mechanisms you can build into the key performance indicators for a scheme. So, for example, the paint industry, the water-based and the solvent-based are different because of their specific gravity, because obviously the toxicity of solvent versus water. So there's lots of different ways you can design the scheme and to take all those considerations on board and to make sure it's fit for your sector as well.
Yeah, thanks, John. My question really was partly answered by your previous answer to the previous question. It's sort of, cheaper people that want to freeload off any scheme that do so already anyway. And also the quality. By that I mean the build of anything that gets fitted into a fit out. Is it a good quality? Is it going to last a long time? How do we show that? And of course, there is testing that's available, third-party independent testing, which it would be good if all imported furniture went through that as well. Mostly, obviously, the cheaper material, because they can look good, but several years down the road of use, they start to look a bit flimsy and start to come apart. So that has to impact as well on whether the levy can benefit a good build.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a very good point, Robert, because product stewardship is always looked at addressing end of life, and that's not the case. Product stewardship is around engaging manufacturers and importers to make their product and sector better and to reduce the amount of material at end of life. So it's looking at design for disassembly, for example. Is your product easy to disassemble? And when it comes apart, the child safety seat scheme that's being designed at the moment is doing exactly that. The levy is reduced if they can demonstrate that the safety seat can be easily pulled apart, i.e. there's no pot rivets. there's not the fabric is not completely stitched together, which puts an additional time impost onto the recycler to pull it apart. So there's lots of ways that can be looked, but to design for disassembly and design for sustainability should definitely be inbuilt in the key performance criteria of the scheme as you go down that track. Absolutely, 100%.
Yep, thank you.
Make sure you keep reminding the working group of that as well. It's not about recycling.
Yes, end of life can be after 3 years or 30 years, can't it?
Brilliant. Well, if there's nothing else outstanding, we can wrap up there. We're just approaching 12 o'clock. Lloyd, everyone on the call today should be expecting a call, email follow-up from yourself, today's sessions. And the next immediate step is to take a look at the terms of reference document, consider those in-scope items and their applicability to the products that your companies, your organizations you represent are placing on the market. And we hope be a part of this journey with us. As you can see, a hell of a lot of work to be done. This is, a 1, 2, 3 year commitment. The working group meetings will be, no more than I think probably bi-monthly or quarterly moving forward. And in between times, there'll be material flow analyses, etc., going on. So I'm more than happy to wrap up there unless you got anything final to add, Lloyd.
No, happy to leave it there, and just looking forward to reaching out to each of you directly and getting the ball rolling. So thanks for joining today, and look forward to next steps.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you all. We'll look forward to the chance to chat again soon.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Cheers.